going into the free agency market, you talk about the Knicks and what the Knicks had the most money to spend in the offseason, $54 million. And it was a foregone conclusion that the Knicks were going to go after maybe a Chris Paul, Dame time in a trade, or a point guard, maybe a Bradley Beal. But it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. The Knicks decided to bring back Nerlens Noel with a $30 million 3-year contract. They also brought back Rose, who had a fantastic second half of the season after being traded from the Detroit Pistons. Looked really, really important, Derrick Rose, for the New York Knicks in his second stint with the New York Knicks and Tom Thibodeau. So Derrick Rose had a fantastic second half, averaging almost 17 points off the bench, and got a 3-year, $43 million contract from the Knicks. But, the Knicks lost a lot of players, too. And the interesting thing is they brought back Alec Burks with 3 years, $30 million steal for a guy that came off the bench, played very well in some games, was the Knicks' best offensive option. So that was it. And Speedy, I know there was a particular player that the Knicks added in free agency that you loved, and I think the fans need to know what you thought of him.
Yeah, Evan Fournier was one that I really liked as a value. He's always been underrated for a very bad Orlando Magic team for a while. Granted, he didn't play well when he went to the Celtics, but I think he had a hard time just fitting in with those other wing players. He didn't get a lot of playing time. And a guy that is a very good offensive option, mid-range three-point shooter type. Not really a great passer, but not a bad passer either. Not going to be a liability. He's going to be a wing-type player, and the Knicks need wing-type players off the bench that could be more of offensive options. The Knicks were a great defensive team last year. They were number 1 and even top 3 in a lot
top
of
5 in almost every defensive category.
Top 5, top 3, or even number 1 in a lot of different categories. And they just lacked the offense for a while. They were 25th. They were efficient, but they were just, again, they weren't overly potent.
Wasn't good enough to win.
Right, potent enough offensively. And I think Fournier could help him take that next step for the money that they got him to. They didn't have to give him a max contract, which was nice. I thought when he was entering the free agent market, that's what he was going to go for. The Knicks didn't give him that, and I think that was a great move for them. Whether he's the 5th starter, 4th starter type in the starting lineup or off the bench, it's going to be a great weapon for them.
And then OKC bought out Kemba Walker's contract, and everybody who knows me as a Knicks fan and really a basketball fan, my favorite player was Kemba Walker. And when I heard Kemba Walker, somebody posted up on Facebook, what are the Knicks going to do with Kemba Walker? I said, what are you talking about? I look up, and then all of a sudden I read that Kemba Walker was bought out by OKC after he got traded from Boston, and the first team he wanted to go to was the Knicks. The Knicks got him on a veteran's minimum, whatever you want to call it, and you get Kemba Walker for the season. Last year he had knee problems. His first year with the Boston Celtics, he was an all-star. This guy is an all-star caliber point guard. If he's 100% healthy, he's going to give the Knicks all-star caliber numbers. Now, last year he averaged 19 points a game, and he wasn't 100% healthy. When he was at the top of his game, he was averaging between 26 and 28 points with the Charlotte Hornets. So if he is 100% or even 90%, if he can give the Knicks 24, 25 points as your starting point guard with Derrick Rose coming off the bench, this could be a very potent offense. Obviously, after re-signing Julius Randle on Thursday afternoon, that was a huge, huge get. And if you look at Rose, Leon Rose needed to keep an all-star and keep a superstar here. And after not really landing a superstar in free agency, with obviously Chris Paul and all the guys, even Kawhi Leonard, who's still available, Jimmy Butler, that was obviously opting out of his contract and then gets an ultra huge contract. The Knicks needed to make a splash in getting Julius Randle on the cheap. Julius Randle, if he waited till next year and he had another year like this year, he would have gotten a $200 million contract.
Yeah, for sure.
He's an elite player, that means. And he took less money and signed for less money this offseason, 4 years, $117 million, because he's given the Knicks an opportunity next year, if there's a free agent that they really like to band together, or maybe even that's trade deadline with the players that they have, to make a trade and bring another superstar to play with Julius Randle. So this is good news for the New York Knicks. They still have RJ Barrett, who's under contract for the next 2 or 3 years before he becomes a free agent. He arbitrates himself in free agency. So there's so much to like about the New York Knicks, Speedy, and the fact that they got Kemba Walker on the cheap. Really, everybody keeps talking about Dame time. Where are the Knicks going at the point guard position? Where are you going to get a good point guard, not a 32-year-old point guard? Because Kemba Walker's 30 years old. But if he's 100% healthy, I believe Kemba has a good 3 or 4 years left to really give you maximum effort and could be a big part of the Knicks maybe winning a championship in 2 years from now, even though he only signed a 1-year deal. Who knows? If he has a good season this year, the Knicks can extend him. So, Speedy, I mean, the Knicks have done a lot this offseason, and this is a different Knicks team.
A lot of good value across the board with Kemba Walker, too. You're not having to pay the $36 million that OKC would have had to pay him this year. They bought him out, got him on a fresh new contract. I wouldn't necessarily say a prove-it deal. I don't think he has anything to prove on the court, just with the injury. That's the biggest issue, because he's more of an attacking type point guard. Great vision when he goes to the hoop and can pass it to the corner very well. Like, there's a lot of different things that he brings to that. So how well will his legs hold up and his speed, we'll see if it's diminished. It didn't look like it was going like that quite yet, which is good, and that's why I think the Knicks are trying to give him that kind of contract. They might extend him more later on in the contract, but for that value, it's tremendous, and the Knicks haven't had a point guard like this in ages. So getting him with Derrick Rose, if he's still not 100% healthy, Kemba right away, then Derrick Rose can start, and then he'll come off the bench, and then they can flip-flop, because Kemba's the better player when healthy at this point in his career, but Derrick Rose showed that he's very capable of starting still.
He's not starting. Kemba Walker will be starting for the New York
No,
Knicks.
I agree with that. I'm just saying Derrick Rose, if Kemba still has to ease his way back in from the injury.
That's a good dynamic duo.
It's great.
You know, when you think of duos and you think of the New York Knicks, when was the last time you could say that the Knicks had two good, legitimate point guards that you're going to get 17 points from one of them off the bench and possibly 20 to 25 points as a starter? Chris Childs and Charlie Ward. And I mean, I think this is the best dynamic duo we've seen the Knicks have since the Walt Clive Frazier days. Okay, so this is good news for the New York Knicks. Kemba Walker, who grew up a Knicks fan, he's from the Bronx, won a championship with the UConn Huskies. I think that this is a great move, and he wanted to be here in New York. He grew up here. This is where he wanted to be. So Kemba Walker getting his buyout money, he doesn't really have to worry about the big bucks that he could make with the New York Knicks this year. Worry about trying to get this Knicks in the Eastern Conference Championship. And with the Eastern Conference open, and it is open this year, is the 76ers better than they were last year? I would say no. Are the Bucks a better team than they were last year? I don't think so. I
no,
think
they just really
they lost Tucker.
Yeah,
they lost Tucker, so they're not the same strong team that they were. Atlanta's not the same team. They
kept their pieces.
Yeah, but they're not the same team. There are certain players that they did lose to free agency as well. So the Knicks, out of all the Eastern Conference, besides the Chicago Bulls, the Knicks made the most acquisitions. They had the most money, and I think adding Kemba Walker could change the outlook for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, the Knicks values were way better than the Bulls values, too. I think the Bulls values, they just wanted to get some names in there. I thought they overpaid a little bit for DeRozan and for Lonzo Ball. Obviously, they're good players, but value the Knicks got not only good players, they got great value with pretty much everybody that they brought in, too. And they kept a lot of their own guys. They really only lost Reggie Bullock, and they replaced him. And
went to Dallas.
And they replaced him with Evan Fournier. And Evan Fournier is a great player.
He's better.
Of course, Alec Burks. So I loved him at the beginning of the season. He was the Knicks' best offensive player over a lot of the times in the beginning of the season. Before a lot of guys like Derrick Rose,
even in the second half, too.
Yeah, he had great stretches with the Knicks, and getting him back as cheap as they did was very good. He's a good defensive player, 3-and-D type guy.
Seventh man off the bench,
right? And I love those kinds of moves. They got really, really good value. And the Eastern Conference was definitely more of, all right, let's keep our guys and hope for the best with a lot of these teams. Not with the Knicks.
But we talk about depth, how it's so very important with the NBA now. It's not always about you need two superstars, no question. And Kemba Walker and Julius Randle, if Kemba Walker is 100% healthy, he's a superstar. And obviously, if Julius Randle does what he did last year, he's a superstar. So the Knicks got their two superstars, and they have tremendous depth, adding Fournier and obviously the players and the acquisitions they've made. And bringing Derrick Rose back off the bench, you can honestly say in the Eastern Conference, the Knicks have possibly the best duo point guards, one from the starter and one off the bench. So the Knicks have positioned themselves very, very well. And then adding Grimes in the draft and McBride, I mean, they have a ton of young players. Quigley, who's up for Rookie of the Year this year. Obi Toppin, who is playing a lot better in the second half, especially in the playoffs. And the Knicks are going to see a lot of him, too. I mean, the Knicks are really positioned very, very well. They didn't have to trade Kevin Knox. They didn't have to trade any other young players where they can use that as trade bait in the middle of the season if they see a player that they want. So it's good news. And the Knicks have really positioned themselves very, very well. If they want Dame time, they could still go after Dame time and maybe trade a Walker or a Rose and some other pieces to get a Dame time. So that's good news. And even the Brooklyn Nets, they did a lot too. They had a very good draft. They added some good guard play, which they definitely need after losing Spencer Dinwiddie to free agency, who I think would have played a big part of them making the finals if he actually played.
Yeah.
And also, they don't really need big superstars. The They need veteran guys. They brought back some of the veterans. Blake Griffin, who signed a one-year deal with them. I was very surprised he signed a one-year deal because he's getting older now, and he could get another decent contract. Instead, he took a one-year deal with Brooklyn.
Championship.
Yeah, but there's no guarantees with them.
No, it never is, but still.
Even in the Eastern Conference, I don't know if they could come out of the Eastern Conference.
No, it's not guaranteed. I'm just saying that was his mindset. I think he probably would have gotten that contract from a fringe or non-contender, but other contenders might have given him that, but he liked the Nets, sticking with the Nets, and he played very well for the Nets, so they're going to give him a little more.
And then there was Russell Westbrook, who gets traded at the NBA draft. I'm not surprised this was going to happen. We've been hearing this for the last couple of weeks. Is it a big move for the Lakers? Yeah, because this solidifies the Lakers as their big three. And winning a championship, if they want to compete with the Brooklyn Nets of the world and maybe the Golden State Warriors when they get healthy with Klay Thompson coming back, they're going to need that big three. And I think Russell Westbrook fits the culture over there. I know a lot of people don't like Russell Westbrook. I think if there's anybody that can control Russell Westbrook, it's LeBron James. So with the acquisitions they've made with Noon and Monk and bringing back Dwight Howard, I mean, this team is stacked. And by the way, Carmelo Anthony is going to play with LeBron James, which they both wanted to play with each other on the same team for years, especially when they were drafted in the same draft. Carmelo went
three, I believe.
Yes.
Darko Milicic was two, and then Bosh went 4, and Dwayne Wade went 5, I think, was the order.
Yeah, it was a crazy draft, by the way. Carmelo Anthony and LeBron have grown up together, very close, and they've always wanted to win a championship together. And why not do it in 2022? And I think there's a very good chance that possibly can happen.
Yeah, the Westbrook trade is definitely interesting in a lot of facets. Again, a lot of people are saying, it's not going to work because Russ needs the ball in his hands, LeBron needs the ball in his hands. But LeBron can play off the ball very well, too, because he could do a lot of different things. And I like it for the fact that Russ will take a lot of pressure off LeBron when it comes to ball handling. He could play off the ball more. He could play inside more if he wants to. And the workload that Russ will bring on is going to help LeBron just manage the season as a whole. He could do more load management. They don't have to play just Anthony Davis. And if Anthony Davis gets hurt, that's still a good backup plan rather than having just LeBron and everybody else. Yeah. And I think that helps in a sense too. Now, whether he shows up in the playoffs is another question because he's had his woes recently for sure. But teams, when he's the third option with the OKC Thunder, they made the NBA Finals in 2012. They made 2 conference finals besides that. So I think that'll help in a sense. When he's the primary guy, that's the teams that shoots them out of the playoffs. But when he's the third option type guy, they haven't had as many issues with that loaded OKC team. And we know this Lakers team is loaded too with that big three.
All righty then. Love that movie. Ace Ventura.